Step away from the display case, ma'am. Sarah Mitchell's hands froze above the velvet-lined jewelry box. The security guard's voice cut through the elegant chatter of Manhattan's most exclusive charity auction like a blade. 200 of New York's elite turned their heads toward the commotion, champagne glasses pausing midway to painted lips. I wasn't doing anything wrong. Sarah's voice remained steady despite the adrenaline flooding her system. She had been examining the Carter family's legendary sapphire necklace for authentication purposes, a routine part of her job as the museum's senior art restorer. The piece was scheduled for auction in 20 minutes. The necklace is missing from the case. Detective Rodriguez appeared beside the security guard, his badge glinting under the crystal chandeliers. We need you to remain calm and cooperate. Sarah's stomach dropped. She glanced back at the display case where the Midnight Empress had rested moments before. The depression in the black velvet remained, but the $2.3 million necklace had vanished. This is impossible. I was authenticating the piece for the auction house. I have proper credentials. Sarah reached for her purse to retrieve her museum identification, but the detective's hand shot out to stop her. Don't move. We have witnesses who saw you at this case when the alarm triggered. The crowd pressed closer, their whispers growing louder. Sarah recognized several prominent collectors and auction house representatives among the faces. Her professional reputation was disintegrating in real time. Sarah Mitchell? A deep voice cut through the chaos. She turned to see a tall man in an impeccably tailored charcoal suit approaching. His steel blue eyes assessed her with the cold precision of someone accustomed to evaluating threats. I'm Ryan Carter. That necklace belongs to my family. Sarah had researched the Carter collection extensively. Ryan Carter, 32, had inherited Carter Securities after his father's death 3 years ago. The company specialized in ensuring high-value art and antiquities for private collectors and museums worldwide. He was known for his ruthless business practices and his ability to recover stolen artifacts. Mr. Carter, I can explain. I was conducting a routine authentication when you decided my family's heirloom would look better in your personal collection. Ryan's expression remained impassive, but his words hit like physical blows. That's not what happened. Sarah kept her voice professional despite the accusation. I've authenticated dozens of pieces for auction houses. I would never compromise my integrity for personal gain. A shorter man with thinning brown hair and wire-rimmed glasses appeared at Ryan's shoulder. I'm Derek Carter, Ryan's business partner. We appreciate the police department's quick response to this situation. Derek's demeanor seemed more sympathetic than Ryan's, but Sarah caught something calculating in his expression. She had dealt with enough art dealers to recognize when someone was performing for an audience. Detective Rodriguez cleared his throat. We're going to need to search your belongings, Ms. Mitchell. The security footage shows you were the last person at this display case before the alarm activated. Of course. Sarah opened her small evening purse, revealing only her phone, lipstick, museum ID, and credit cards. But you won't find anything because I didn't take it. The detective's partner arrived with a handheld metal detector. The device remained silent as it passed over Sarah's body and belongings. No hidden jewelry, no concealed compartments. The necklace didn't just disappear, Ryan said, his gaze never leaving Sarah's face. Security cameras cover every angle of this room. Then the cameras will show I'm innocent. Sarah met his stare directly. I have nothing to hide. Detective Rodriguez spoke into his radio, requesting the security footage be preserved for immediate review. The auction house manager, a nervous man in his 50s, wrung his hands as he calculated the financial implications of the evening's disaster. Ladies and gentlemen, the manager announced to the crowd, we'll be suspending tonight's auction while the police investigate this matter. The crowd began to disperse, their excited whispers following them toward the exits. Sarah found herself surrounded by law enforcement officers, her evening gown feeling suddenly inappropriate for her circumstances. Ms. Mitchell, you'll need to come with us for questioning. Detective Rodriguez's tone was professional but firm. You have the right to remain silent. As the Miranda warning continued, Sarah watched Ryan Carter observe the proceedings with detached interest. His business partner Derek whispered something in his ear, but Ryan's attention remained fixed on her. She couldn't determine whether his expression showed suspicion, curiosity, or something else entirely. The handcuffs clicked around her wrists with a finality that made her knees weak. 24 hours ago, She had been preparing authentication reports in her quiet museum laboratory. Now she was being arrested for grand larceny in front of Manhattan's art world elite. "This is a mistake," she said as Detective Rodriguez guided her toward the exit. "When you review the security footage, you'll see I'm telling the truth." Ryan Carter stepped forward. "We'll be reviewing every second of that footage, Ms. Mitchell. If you're innocent, the evidence will support your claim." His words carried no warmth, but they also lacked the vindictive anger she might have expected from a victim of theft. Sarah clung to that small distinction as the police led her past the remaining auction guests and into the Manhattan night. The last thing she saw before the police car door closed was Ryan Carter standing in the auction house doorway, his expression unreadable as he watched her disappear into the city that had been her home for 8 years. Ryan Carter sat in the security office of Whitmore Auction House at 3 a.m, his third cup of coffee growing cold as he replayed the footage for the 7th time. The monitors cast blue light across his tired face while Derek paced behind him, checking his phone repeatedly. The timestamp shows 9:47 p.m. when she approaches the display case, Derek said, pointing at the screen. The alarm triggered at 9:52. 5 minutes is plenty of time to pocket a necklace. Ryan paused the footage. Sarah Mitchell stood frozen on screen, her hand reaching toward the jewelry case. The angle made it impossible to see exactly what she was doing, but her body language seemed more focused than furtive. He had studied enough insurance fraud cases to recognize the difference. "Look at her shoulders," Ryan said. "She's not trying to hide anything. If you were stealing a $2 million necklace, would you stand directly in front of a security camera? Criminals make mistakes. That's how we catch them." Derek pulled up a chair beside Ryan. "The evidence is clear. She was the only person at that case when the necklace disappeared." Ryan clicked to the next camera angle. This view showed Sarah from the side, but a pillar blocked the crucial moment when her hand made contact with the display case. He switched to the third camera, which should have captured everything from behind the case. The screen showed static. "Technical malfunction," Derek explained before Ryan could ask. "The security chief said that camera's been acting up all week." Ryan leaned back in his chair. In 15 years of investigating art theft, he had learned to trust his instincts. Too many coincidences usually meant someone was manipulating the situation. A malfunctioning camera at the exact moment of a theft stretched credibility. What about the other guests? The footage shows at least 30 people near that display area throughout the evening. Derek pulled up the guest list on his tablet. "We've accounted for all of them. Museum directors, private collectors, auction house staff. People with reputations to protect." Sarah Mitchell was the only unknown quantity. "She works for the Metropolitan Museum. That's hardly unknown. As a restorer, Ryan. Not a curator or department head. She makes $50,000 a year and lives in a studio apartment in Queens. The Midnight Empress represents 46 years of her salary." Ryan knew Derek's arguments made logical sense, but something about Sarah Mitchell's behavior bothered him. Her shock at the accusation had seemed genuine. Professional thieves typically prepared for the possibility of getting caught. His phone buzzed with a text from the district attorney's office. Sarah Mitchell had been released on $50,000 bail, posted by her emergency fund and a loan from her museum's legal defense program. She would be arraigned in 3 days. "Good," Derek said, reading over Ryan's shoulder. "Now we can focus on damage control. The insurance company will want a full report, and we need to notify our other clients about potential security vulnerabilities." Ryan closed the laptop containing the security footage. The inconsistencies would bother him until he understood what really happened in those 5 minutes. He had built Carter Securities on attention to detail, and details were telling him this case wasn't as straightforward as it appeared. "I want to interview her myself before the arraignment." Derek stopped gathering his papers. "That's not necessary. The police have everything under control. This is our family's property and our company's reputation. I prefer handling important matters personally. Ryan, you're emotionally invested because of the necklace's history. Your grandmother wore that piece. Let the legal system handle this professionally." The comment about his grandmother struck deeper than Derek intended. The Midnight Empress had been Evelyn Carter's signature piece, worn to every major social event until her death. Ryan's last memory of his grandmother involved her telling him stories about the necklace while he sat beside her hospital bed. But emotional attachment was exactly why he needed to understand what happened. If Sarah Mitchell had stolen the necklace, He wanted to hear her confession directly. If she was innocent, he needed to know who was really responsible. I'll talk to her attorney and arrange a meeting. Derek's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. The prosecutor won't appreciate you interfering with their case. I'm not interfering. I'm exercising my rights as the victim of a crime. Ryan left the auction house as dawn painted the Manhattan skyline in shades of orange and pink. The city was awakening around him, delivery trucks navigating narrow streets while early commuters emerged from subway stations. He had always found clarity in the morning hustle, but today his thoughts remained clouded by questions. His phone rang as he reached his car. The caller ID showed Sarah Mitchell's number, which he had obtained from the police report. "Mr. Carter?" Her voice sounded exhausted but determined. "I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I need 5 minutes of your time." "Ms. Mitchell, you should be talking to your attorney, not me. My attorney is handling the legal aspects. I'm calling because you're the only person who can help me prove what really happened last night." Ryan hesitated. Meeting with an accused thief without legal counsel present violated every principle of proper business conduct. But something in her voice reminded him of his own desperation when his father died and left him to navigate the complexities of Carter Securities alone. "Where do you want to meet?" Sarah Mitchell sat across from Ryan Carter in a small coffee shop in Midtown, her hands wrapped around a mug she hadn't touched in 20 minutes. The morning rush had thinned out, leaving them relative privacy among scattered business people checking emails and students cramming for exams. "You said you could help me prove what happened," Ryan said, studying her face for signs of deception. "I'm listening. The authentication process I was conducting follows specific protocols. I documented everything." Sarah reached into her bag and pulled out a tablet. "These are photos I took of the Midnight Empress before examining it. The timestamp shows 9:43 p.m. Ryan looked at the screen. The image showed the sapphire necklace in perfect detail, each stone catching the auction house lighting. The craftsmanship was exquisite, but something nagged at him as he examined the photograph. "What exactly were you authenticating?" The auction house requested verification of the piece's age and origin. It's standard procedure for items valued above $2 million. Sarah swiped to the next image. "But when I examined the necklace under magnification, I found something unexpected." The second photograph showed a close-up of the necklace's clasp. Ryan could see tiny markings etched into the metal, barely visible to the naked eye. "These hallmarks don't match the documented specifications for your family's necklace. The original Midnight Empress was crafted in 1887 by Tiffany & Company. These markings suggest a different maker and a more recent date." Ryan's coffee cup stopped halfway to his lips. "Are you suggesting the necklace was a fake?" "I'm suggesting it requires further examination. That's why I was photographing the piece so carefully when the theft occurred." The implications hit Ryan like a physical blow. If the Midnight Empress in the auction was a reproduction, where was the original? And why would someone steal a fake? You realize this gives you motive for the theft. If you discovered the necklace was a reproduction, you could have taken it to expose the fraud. Sarah's expression hardened. "Or someone could have taken it to prevent me from exposing the fraud." Ryan pulled out his phone and scrolled through his contacts until he found Dr. Patricia Hernandez, a jewelry expert Carter Securities had used for authentication services. He dialed her number. "Patricia, it's Ryan Carter. I need you to review some documentation about the Midnight Empress." He explained the situation while Sarah listened, her face tense with anticipation. "Ryan, I hate to tell you this over the phone, but I've been meaning to call you about some concerns regarding your family's collection." Dr. Hernandez's voice carried a weight that made Ryan's stomach drop. "3 pieces you've had appraised in the past 2 years have shown irregularities that warrant further investigation." "What kind of irregularities?" "Microscopic analysis revealed materials and techniques inconsistent with their supposed ages. I didn't want to alarm you without definitive proof, but if the Midnight Empress has similar issues, we may be looking at a systematic problem." Ryan ended the call and stared at Sarah across the small table. The coffee shop's ambient noise seemed muted as the significance of Dr. Hernandez's words sank in. "3 pieces," he said quietly. "Someone has been systematically replacing my family's collection with reproductions. The question is how long this has been happening and who has had access to the original pieces." Sarah leaned forward. "Your family's collection is insured through Carter Securities, correct?" who handles the paperwork for appraisals and storage transfers. Derek manages most of the operational details while I focus on client relations and new business development. Ryan felt a chill that had nothing to do with the October weather outside. He's been with the company for 8 years. He helped me rebuild after my father died. Sarah's expression softened slightly. I'm not suggesting your business partner is involved, but someone with intimate knowledge of your collection and your security procedures would be the most likely candidate for this kind of operation. Ryan's phone buzzed with a text from Derek asking about the location of certain client files. The timing felt coincidental in a way that made Ryan uncomfortable. I need to see those authentication photos again. Sarah handed him the tablet and watched as he examined each image carefully. The detail work was meticulous, the kind of documentation that would hold up in court or insurance proceedings. You said your mother was a jeweler. Did she ever work with historical reproductions? Sarah's composure cracked slightly. She died 5 years ago. Breast cancer. But yes, she specialized in creating museum-quality reproductions for educational purposes and insurance replacement pieces. What was her company called? Mitchell Heritage Jewelry. She worked with several major museums and a few private collectors who needed replacement pieces for insurance purposes while their originals were in storage or on loan. Ryan felt the pieces of a larger puzzle beginning to align. A jeweler who specialized in historical reproductions. A missing necklace that showed signs of being a fake. 3 other pieces from his family's collection that had raised authentication concerns. Sarah, I need you to think carefully. Did your mother ever mention working with anyone from Carter Securities or the Carter family specifically? I don't remember her mentioning your company, but she kept detailed records of all her work. Her workshop and files are in storage. I could go through them if you think it might help. Ryan stood up, leaving money on the table for their untouched coffee. We're going to that storage unit right now. And Sarah, from this point forward, we don't discuss this investigation with anyone else, including my business partner. You think Derek is involved? I think someone has been stealing from my family for years, and until I know who, I'm not trusting anyone. Ryan held the door open for her as they left the coffee shop, except the person who tried to expose the fraud and got framed for theft instead. As they walked toward Ryan's car, neither of them noticed the figure watching from across the street, a phone pressed to his ear as he reported their movements to someone on the other end of the line. The storage facility in Queens occupied a converted warehouse that smelled of dust and forgotten memories. Sarah led Ryan through narrow corridors lined with identical metal doors until they reached Unit 247. Her hands shook slightly as she worked the combination lock. I haven't been here since I packed everything after the funeral, she said, rolling up the heavy door to reveal boxes stacked floor to ceiling. Mom was meticulous about documentation. If she worked on anything for your family, there will be records. Ryan stepped into the cramped space, impressed by the organization. Each box was labeled with dates and project categories. He pulled down a container marked Historical Reproductions 2015 to 2018, while Sarah retrieved files from her mother's desk. Look at this. Sarah held up a manila folder thick with photographs and technical specifications. The Midnight Empress Project, dated March 2018. Ryan's blood went cold as he opened the folder. Inside were detailed photographs of the original Midnight Empress, technical drawings showing the exact dimensions of each sapphire, and correspondence on Carter Securities' letterhead. His signature appeared at the bottom of several authorization forms. I never signed these documents. Ryan examined his supposedly authentic signature with growing alarm. And I never authorized the creation of a reproduction. Sarah pulled out additional folders. The Hamilton diamond brooch, the Victorian emerald earrings, the Cartier ruby bracelet. Ryan, my mother created reproductions of at least 12 pieces from your family's collection. Each folder contained the same pattern. Authorization forms bearing Ryan's forged signature, detailed specifications for reproduction, and payment records showing substantial sums transferred to Mitchell Heritage Jewelry. The dates spanned 3 years, beginning shortly after Ryan's father died. Someone has been systematically replacing your collection while you rebuilt the business. Sarah sat on a dusty box, studying the timeline. The timing suggests they took advantage of your grief and inexperience to manipulate company records. Ryan pulled out his phone and called Carter Securities. Derek, I need you to check our client insurance records for the Hamilton diamond brooch. When was it last appraised? Let me check the database. The Hamilton piece was last appraised in August 2018, 5 months after your mother apparently created the reproduction. The appraisal was conducted by Dr. Margaret Steinberg. Ryan, that appraisal was requested by Derek personally, according to the file notes here. Sarah showed him a carbon copy of the request form. He specifically asked for Dr. Steinberg instead of your usual appraiser. Ryan felt the ground shifting beneath him. Derek had joined Carter Securities shortly after Ryan's father died, presenting himself as experienced help during a difficult transition. He had gradually taken over operational responsibilities while Ryan focused on grief and learning the business. Sarah, look at the payment records for your mother's work. How was she compensated? Sarah flipped through bank deposit slips and check stubs. Wire transfers from something called Heritage Asset Management. I don't see any direct payments from Carter Securities. Ryan recognized the shell company name from Carter Securities files. Heritage Asset Management was supposedly a client consortium that pooled resources for group insurance policies. Derek had explained it as a cost-saving measure for smaller collectors. Derek created that company. He told me it streamlined paperwork for multiple small clients. But if he was using it to pay my mother for unauthorized reproductions, he was essentially laundering stolen assets through his own shell company. Sarah stood up, pacing in the limited space. Ryan, I think my mother was being manipulated too. Look at these letters. She handed him a series of increasingly desperate communications from Elena Mitchell to Heritage Asset Management. The letters expressed concern about the project timelines and requests for direct communication with the actual owners of the pieces she was reproducing. Mom was getting suspicious toward the end. This letter from January 2019 says she wanted to speak directly with family members before continuing any additional work. Ryan read his mother's words with growing anger and sadness. Elena Mitchell had been trying to protect his family's legacy while Derek systematically stole it. The dates stop abruptly in March 2019. What happened? Sarah's face crumpled slightly. That's when she was diagnosed with cancer. The treatment was aggressive, and she couldn't work for several months before she died, which gave Derek time to implement whatever he was planning without interference from your mother's questions. Ryan's phone rang. Derek's name appeared on the caller ID. Where are you? I've been trying to reach you for hours. The insurance investigators want to schedule a follow-up interview about the theft. I'm handling some personal business. Can we discuss this later? Ryan, you're not thinking clearly about this situation. The woman you're probably trying to help is a criminal. Don't let misplaced sympathy compromise the company. Ryan met Sarah's eyes as Derek continued talking. Her expression showed the same realization that was crystallizing in his own mind. Derek knew exactly where Ryan was and who he was with. I'll call you back. Ryan ended the call and immediately turned off his phone. We need to leave. Now. What's wrong? Derek just revealed information he shouldn't have. I never told him I was with you. Sarah began gathering the most important files while Ryan loaded boxes into his car. As they worked, she noticed his quiet intensity and the way his jaw tightened when he was concentrating. Despite the circumstances, she found herself studying the way his hands moved with confident precision. Sarah, when this is over, I want you to know that I believe you. Completely. Their eyes met across the storage unit, and Sarah felt something shift between them. The formal distance of their earlier interactions dissolved into something more personal and dangerous. Ryan, the lights in the storage facility went out. Emergency lighting cast eerie shadows as footsteps echoed from the main corridor. Sarah grabbed Ryan's arm, feeling the solid warmth of his muscle beneath his shirt sleeve. Back exit, she whispered, pointing toward a fire door she remembered from previous visits. They moved quietly through the darkness, carrying the most crucial files. Behind them, Sarah could hear voices and the sound of unit doors being systematically opened and searched. Ryan's hand found hers in the darkness, and she was surprised by how natural it felt to let him guide her toward safety. His presence made her feel protected in a way she hadn't experienced since her mother's death. They reached Ryan's car as the first police sirens wailed in the distance. As they drove away from the storage facility, Sarah watched the building recede in the side mirror. Whoever called the police knew exactly where to find us, Ryan said grimly. This isn't just about stolen jewelry anymore. Someone wants to stop us from discovering the truth. Sarah settled back in the passenger seat, acutely aware of Ryan's presence beside her. The danger they faced was real, but so was the growing connection between them. She had started the day as his accused thief. Now they were partners in uncovering a conspiracy that threatened everything he had worked to build. Neither of them noticed the black sedan that began following them as they merged into Queens traffic. Ryan's Manhattan office occupied the entire 32nd floor of a gleaming tower overlooking Central Park. He led Sarah through the empty reception area, their footsteps muffled by expensive carpeting as they made their way toward his private office. It was nearly midnight, and the building's security guard had recognized Ryan but asked no questions about his unexpected visitor. "We need to access the company's insurance database," Ryan said, settling behind his mahogany desk while Sarah examined the wall of family photographs and business awards. "If Derek has been systematically replacing pieces, there should be a trail in our appraisal records." Sarah noticed how Ryan's shoulders tensed as he worked. The past 12 hours had transformed him from a skeptical victim into someone questioning everything he thought he knew about his business and the people he trusted. She found herself studying the concentrated way he typed, the slight furrow between his eyebrows when he encountered something unexpected. "Here's the problem." Ryan turned his monitor so Sarah could see the screen. "According to our database, every piece in my family's collection has been appraised multiple times in the past 3 years. But I only remember authorizing 2 of these appraisals." The records showed a pattern of routine maintenance appraisals, each conducted by different specialists and each slightly adjusting the estimated values of various pieces. To an outside observer, it would appear that Carter Securities was simply maintaining thorough documentation of their holdings. "Look at the scheduling," Sarah said, pointing to dates on the screen. "Every appraisal coincides with periods when you were traveling for business or attending industry conferences. Derek was essentially running the company alone during those times." Ryan pulled up his travel calendar and cross-referenced the dates. Sarah was right. Derek had scheduled appraisals whenever Ryan was unavailable to supervise the process directly. He's been doing this for 3 years, gradually replacing originals with your mother's reproductions, then having them appraised as authentic to maintain the insurance coverage. But why steal them at all? The reproductions are museum quality. Unless someone examined them as closely as I did with the Midnight Empress, they would pass casual inspection. Ryan stood up and walked to the window, staring out at the city lights while his mind worked through the implications. "Because the originals are worth far more than their insurance values. My grandmother's collection includes pieces that haven't been properly evaluated since the 1960s. Some of them could be worth 10 times their current appraised amounts." Sarah felt a chill as the scope of Derek's operation became clear. "He's been slowly liquidating your family's heritage while maintaining the appearance that everything remains intact." The sound of elevator doors opening in the reception area made them both freeze. Ryan checked his watch. Building security made rounds every 2 hours, but the last check had been 30 minutes ago. "Ryan, I saw your car in the garage." Derek's voice carried through the office suite, friendly and concerned. "I've been worried about you." Ryan gestured for Sarah to move behind his desk while he walked toward the reception area. She crouched low, her heart hammering as she listened to Derek's approaching footsteps. "I needed to check some files," Ryan said, trying to keep his voice casual. "Couldn't sleep after everything that happened today. Of course, this whole situation with the theft has been stressful for everyone." Derek appeared in the doorway, his usual composed demeanor intact. "I brought coffee. Thought you might need some company." Sarah could see Derek from her hiding spot behind the desk. He carried 2 cups from their usual coffee shop, but his eyes were scanning the office with predatory alertness. She noticed he was wearing gloves despite the mild weather. "Actually, I was just finishing up," Ryan said. "We can discuss business matters tomorrow. But we should talk about the Mitchell woman. I heard she made bail this afternoon." Derek set the coffee cups on Ryan's desk, directly above where Sarah was hiding. "You haven't had any contact with her, have you?" "Why would I contact her?" "Because you have a tendency to see the best in people, Ryan. It's an admirable quality, but it can be dangerous when dealing with criminals." Sarah watched Derek's feet as he moved around the office. He was examining the room systematically, looking for signs of disturbance or evidence that Ryan hadn't been alone. "Derek, what are you really doing here at midnight?" The question hung in the air for several seconds before Derek answered. When he spoke, his voice had lost its friendly warmth. "I received an alert that someone accessed our secure database from this terminal tonight. Whoever did it was looking at family collection records that most employees don't have authorization to view. Ryan realized his mistake too late. The database access would have triggered security protocols that Derek monitored as part of his operational responsibilities. I have every right to review my own family's records. Of course you do. But I'm curious why you would need to review appraisal schedules and authentication reports for pieces that have been in your family for generations. Derek moved closer to the desk, and Sarah could see his reflection in the dark window. His expression had transformed from concerned partnership to cold calculation. Unless someone has been filling your head with ridiculous theories about fraud or theft. Someone like Sarah Mitchell, who is desperately trying to deflect attention from her own crimes. The only crime here is what you've been doing to my family's collection for 3 years. Derek stopped moving. The silence stretched between them while Sarah held her breath behind the desk. You don't understand the complexities of running this business, Ryan. Your father left behind a company that was bleeding money and a collection that was dramatically undervalued. I saved Carter Securities from bankruptcy. By stealing from me. By modernizing our approach to asset management. The originals are safe, and the reproductions serve their purpose for insurance and display. Everyone benefits from the arrangement. Ryan's voice grew colder. Except for the fact that I never consented to this arrangement. And except for the part where you framed an innocent woman for theft to cover your tracks. Derek laughed, a sound devoid of humor. Sarah Mitchell isn't innocent. She discovered the substitution and tried to blackmail me. The theft was her idea. That's a lie, is it? Ask her yourself. Sarah realized Derek knew she was in the office. Her hiding spot had been discovered. She stood up slowly, meeting Derek's gaze across the room. Hello, Sarah. I was wondering when you would make your appearance. I never tried to blackmail you, Sarah said firmly. I never even knew you existed until yesterday. But your mother did. Elena Mitchell became increasingly difficult to work with toward the end. She wanted to meet with Ryan directly, started asking questions about authorization documents, threatened to expose the entire operation unless she received assurances that everything was legitimate. You were blackmailing my mother. I was protecting a business arrangement that benefited everyone involved. Your mother was well compensated for her work. She had no reason to complicate matters with unnecessary moral concerns. Ryan stepped closer to Derek, his hands clenched into fists. You used her illness against her. You knew she needed money for medical treatment. I provided solutions that met everyone's needs. Unfortunately, some people are incapable of appreciating creative problem solving. Sarah felt rage building in her chest. Derek's casual dismissal of her mother's suffering crystallized everything she had lost over the past 5 years. My mother died believing she had helped preserve historical artifacts. You turned her final work into a criminal enterprise. Your mother died because she couldn't mind her own business, just like you should have minded yours when you discovered the substitution at the auction. The admission hung in the air like a physical presence. Derek had essentially confessed to orchestrating not only the theft scheme, but also Sarah's frame-up. The security footage, Ryan said slowly. You manipulated it to make Sarah look guilty. Digital systems are remarkably easy to manipulate when you understand their vulnerabilities. A few altered timestamps, a conveniently malfunctioning camera, and suddenly an innocent authentication becomes apparent theft. Derek reached into his jacket, and Sarah saw the metallic glint of a gun before Ryan tackled him across the coffee table. The impact sent Derek crashing backward over the coffee table, his weapon skittering across the polished hardwood floor. Ryan landed hard on top of him, both men grunting as they hit the ground with force that rattled the office windows. Sarah, the gun! Ryan shouted as he struggled to pin Derek's arms down. Sarah dove toward the weapon, her hands closing around the cold metal just as Derek managed to throw Ryan off balance. Derek rolled sideways and lunged for her, but Ryan grabbed his ankle and yanked him backward. You don't understand what you're destroying, Derek gasped, his face flushed red as Ryan regained control. This company would have died without my intervention. So you decided to steal from me instead of discussing financial problems like a partner? Ryan pressed Derek's face against the floor while Sarah kept the gun trained on them both, her hands surprisingly steady. Partners? Derek laughed bitterly. Your father never treated me like a partner. I was hired help, Ryan. 20 years of building this business, and he still introduced me as his assistant. Sarah could see old pain and resentment in Derek's expression emotions that had clearly festered for years before erupting into criminal behavior. My father valued your contributions. He left you substantial shares in the company when he died. 15%. After 2 decades of work, he gave me 15% in expected gratitude. Derek stopped struggling, his energy apparently spent. I built the client relationships while he played golf with collectors. I handled the operational complexities while he gave speeches at industry conferences. And when he died, you inherited everything. Ryan stood up slowly, breathing hard from the physical altercation. Sarah noticed a cut above his left eyebrow, where Derek had connected with his elbow, but he seemed otherwise uninjured. So you decided to take what you felt you deserved. I decided to ensure this company's survival. Do you have any idea what Carter Securities was worth when your father died? The market value of our client portfolio? We were operating on credit and reputation, Ryan. Without immediate capital injection, we would have closed within 6 months. Sarah kept the weapon pointed down, but ready as she processed Derek's revelation. Ryan had inherited a failing business along with his grief, making him vulnerable to manipulation by someone he trusted. The original pieces from my family's collection. Where are they now? Derek's expression shifted, becoming almost proud despite his circumstances. Sold through private networks to collectors who appreciate true craftsmanship. The Midnight Empress alone brought in enough to cover our operational expenses for 8 months. You sold my grandmother's necklace. I saved your company. The reproduction serves the same display purposes, maintains insurance coverage, and allowed us to continue operating while building legitimate revenue streams. Ryan walked to his desk and pulled out a bottle of whiskey from the bottom drawer. His hands shook slightly as he poured himself a drink, the events of the past day finally taking their toll. Sarah, look through those files from your mother's workshop. I want to know exactly what Derek forced her to create. Sarah set the gun on Ryan's desk and opened the manila folders they had retrieved from storage. As she read through her mother's correspondence, her expression grew increasingly troubled. Ryan, there's something else here. Derek, you told my mother that Ryan's father was still alive when this project started. You said the reproductions were being created for insurance purposes while the originals were placed in secured storage. A necessary fiction to ensure her cooperation. You manipulated a dying woman by making her believe she was helping preserve family heirlooms for legitimate purposes. Sarah's voice carried a cold fury that made Derek glance away. She trusted you because she thought she was working with a respectable company. Ryan sat down heavily in his chair, reading over Sarah's shoulder as she continued through the documents. Derek, these letters show my mother expressing concern about the project timeline. She was getting suspicious toward the end. Elena Mitchell was becoming a liability. She wanted verification of authorization documents, insisted on meeting with family members, threatened to contact the authorities if she didn't receive satisfactory explanations. So you arranged for the project to end when she became too sick to continue working. Derek's silence confirmed Sarah's accusation. She spent her final months believing she had contributed to preserving historical artifacts. You robbed her of that comfort during the worst period of her life. Ryan reached across the desk and took Sarah's hand. The simple gesture provided unexpected comfort as she struggled with the revelation that her mother's final professional work had been corrupted by Derek's criminal enterprise. Sarah, your mother's craftsmanship was extraordinary. The reproductions are so accurate that they fooled multiple authentication experts over 3 years. That doesn't excuse what he did to her. No, it doesn't. But it means she was an artist who created something beautiful, regardless of Derek's intentions. Sarah felt tears threatening as Ryan's words offered a perspective she hadn't considered. Her mother's work had been manipulated, but the skill and artistry remained genuine. Derek struggled to sit up against the wall, watching their interaction with calculating eyes. This touching moment of connection doesn't change your situation. The police believe Sarah stole the Midnight Empress. My word against hers won't be sufficient to convince a jury otherwise. Your confession tonight will be sufficient, Ryan said. What confession? I see no recording equipment, no witnesses except Sarah herself. A criminal's accusation against a respected businessman who's worked for the Carter family for 8 years. Sarah realized Derek was right. They had uncovered his scheme, but proving it in court would require more evidence than accusations and her mother's documentation. The original security footage, she said suddenly. You manipulated the recordings, but there must be backup systems or off-site storage that preserve the authentic footage. Derek's expression faltered slightly. Building security maintains independent recording systems, Ryan said, understanding Sarah's direction. Derek has access to our internal cameras, but not the building's master security network. The backup footage will show what really happened at the auction. It will prove I was authenticating the piece, not stealing it. Derek realized his mistake too late. His manipulation of Carter Security's equipment had left the building's independent security systems intact, systems he couldn't access or alter. Ryan pulled out his phone and dialed building security. "This is Ryan Carter in Suite 3200. I need to speak with your security chief about reviewing backup footage from yesterday evening. It's related to a police investigation." As Ryan spoke with security, Sarah noticed the way his jaw relaxed for the first time since they had met. The solution to clearing her name was finally within reach. "They'll have the footage ready for police review within an hour," Ryan said, ending the call. Derek slumped against the wall, defeated. "You have no idea what you're destroying. This company won't survive the scandal." "Then we'll rebuild it properly this time," Ryan said. "Without lies, without theft, and without betraying the people who trust us." Sarah looked at Ryan across his desk and felt something fundamental shift between them. They had started as adversaries, become reluctant allies, and were now partners united by shared purpose and growing attraction. The danger wasn't over, but they had survived Derek's worst revelations together. And in the process, Sarah had discovered something she hadn't expected to find again after her mother's death. Someone who understood loss and was willing to fight for justice alongside her. The backup security footage played on the building manager's computer screen, each frame confirming what Sarah and Ryan already knew. The timestamp showed 9:47 p.m. as Sarah approached the display case, but this version revealed details the manipulated footage had obscured. A man in a waiter's uniform could be seen moving behind the display case at the exact moment Sarah was examining the necklace. "There," Sarah pointed to the screen. "That's when the actual theft occurred. While I was documenting the authentication inconsistencies, someone was accessing the case from behind." Detective Rodriguez studied the footage carefully. Ryan had called him at 4 in the morning, and the detective had arrived at the Carter Securities building with backup and a warrant for Derek's arrest. "The facial recognition software should be able to identify the waiter," Rodriguez said, freezing the frame on the man's profile. "But we'll need more than this to build a comprehensive case against Derek Carter." Derek sat in handcuffs on Ryan's office couch, his lawyer whispering urgent instructions in his ear. Despite being caught, he maintained an air of smug confidence that made Sarah uneasy. "Detective, there's something else you need to know," Ryan said. "This theft was part of a much larger scheme involving systematic replacement of valuable artifacts with reproductions." As Ryan explained Derek's operation, Sarah noticed Derek's expression growing increasingly agitated. His confidence was cracking as the scope of his exposure became clear. "My client wishes to cooperate fully with the investigation," Derek's attorney announced suddenly. "In exchange for consideration regarding sentencing, Mr. Carter is prepared to provide information about other parties involved in this operation." "What other parties?" Rodriguez asked. Derek leaned forward, his handcuffs clinking softly. "Did you really think I was operating alone? The authentication network, the private collectors, the international buyers. This operation required substantial coordination." Sarah felt a chill as Derek's words suggested a criminal enterprise much larger than they had imagined. Ryan's family collection had been just one target among many. "I want full immunity before I say another word," Derek continued, "because some of the people involved in this network have resources that make my activities look insignificant." Detective Rodriguez exchanged glances with his partner. "We'll need to involve federal authorities if this crosses international boundaries." Ryan's phone buzzed with an urgent text message. As he read it, his face went pale. "We have a problem. Building security says 3 men just entered the garage using electronic key cards. They're heading for the elevators." "My associates," Derek said with returning confidence. "I sent a distress signal before you disarmed me. They're here to ensure I don't say anything that might compromise our mutual interests." Rodriguez immediately called for backup while his partner drew his weapon. "How many people are we talking about?" "Enough to handle a few local police officers and 2 amateur investigators." Sarah moved closer to Ryan, feeling his protective presence as the situation escalated beyond their control. What had started as a theft investigation was becoming something far more dangerous. "Is there another way out of this building?" Rodriguez asked Ryan. "Emergency stairwell on the north side, but it only leads to the street level. That's our best option. We need to get you both out of here while we wait for backup." As they gathered the essential evidence files, Derek spoke up again. "Sarah, your mother knew more about this operation than she admitted to you. If you leave now, you'll never learn the truth about what she was really involved in." "Don't listen to him," Ryan said firmly. "He's trying to manipulate you." But Sarah hesitated. Derek's words struck at her deepest fears about her mother's final years. Had Elena Mitchell been an unwilling victim or a knowing participant in criminal activity? The elevator doors chimed as they reached the 32nd floor. "Move," Rodriguez ordered, guiding them toward the emergency stairwell. They reached the stairwell door just as the first gunshots erupted in the office suite behind them. Rodriguez pushed Sarah and Ryan into the stairwell while his partner returned fire. "Go down 2 floors, then take the service elevator to the parking garage," Rodriguez shouted over the gunfire. "My backup will meet you there." Sarah and Ryan descended the concrete stairs as quickly as possible, their footsteps echoing in the narrow space. Behind them, the sound of automatic weapons fire grew more intense. "Sarah, whatever Derek said about your mother, don't let it distract you now," Ryan said as they reached the 30th floor. "We'll find the truth, but first we need to survive." They entered the service elevator, and Ryan pressed the button for the parking garage. As the elevator descended, Sarah realized they were completely alone for the first time since Derek's capture. "Ryan, I need you to know something. When this started, I thought you were just another wealthy collector who didn't care about anything except protecting your assets. And now I see someone who's willing to risk everything to do what's right, even when it means destroying the business your father left you." Ryan reached for her hand as the elevator continued downward. "Sarah, what I see is someone who tried to protect my family's legacy when she could have easily looked the other way. You risked your career to expose fraud that didn't directly affect you." The elevator shuddered to a stop at the parking garage level. As the doors opened, Sarah could see police cars arriving with sirens wailing, their red and blue lights reflecting off the concrete walls. "Over here." Detective Rodriguez's partner waved them toward a police vehicle. "We need to get you both to a secure location." As they hurried across the garage, Sarah heard the distinctive sound of motorcycle engines echoing from the street level. Derek's associates weren't giving up easily. "The museum," Sarah said suddenly. "Ryan, we need to go to the Metropolitan Museum. If Derek's operation involves multiple institutions, there might be evidence in the authentication records where I work. It's too dangerous. These people are armed professionals. But it's also the last place they'd expect us to go. And I know security protocols there better than anywhere else." Ryan looked at her with admiration and concern. "Sarah, I won't let anything happen to you. I know. That's why we're going to end this tonight." Detective Rodriguez's partner helped them into an unmarked police car as gunfire erupted again from the building above. "Where do you want to go?" "The Metropolitan Museum of Art," Sarah said before Ryan could object. "Fifth Avenue in trance." As they pulled out of the garage, Sarah saw 3 motorcycles pursuing them through the side mirror. Derek's associates had anticipated their escape route. The chase through Manhattan at 5 in the morning felt surreal. Empty streets that would soon fill with morning commuters became a dangerous raceway as the police car weaved between delivery trucks and early taxicabs. "They're gaining on us," Ryan observed, watching the motorcycles navigate traffic with professional precision. Sarah pulled out her phone and called the museum's night security chief. "Tom, it's Sarah Mitchell. I need emergency access to the authentication lab. It's related to a police investigation." The police car took a sharp turn onto Fifth Avenue, tires squealing against the asphalt. Behind them, the motorcycles maintained their pursuit with mechanical determination. "There," Sarah pointed to the museum's imposing facade. "Tom will have the staff entrance open." As they pulled up to the museum, Sarah felt a strange sense of coming full circle. This was where her career had begun, where her mother had first taught her to appreciate the artistry in historical jewelry. Now it might be where Derek's criminal network finally faced justice. Ryan followed her toward the museum entrance, both of them aware that they were walking into unknown danger. But they were walking into it together, united by shared purpose and a growing connection that felt stronger than the fear surrounding them. The museum's ancient stones seemed to welcome them home. The Metropolitan Museum's Great Hall felt like a cathedral in the pre-dawn darkness, its soaring ceilings and marble columns creating dramatic shadows under the emergency lighting. Sarah led Ryan through the familiar corridors toward her authentication laboratory, their footsteps echoing in the vast spaces normally filled with thousands of visitors. The authentication records are kept in a secure server room adjacent to my lab, Sarah explained as they navigated past Egyptian sarcophagi and Greek statuary. If Derek's network has been operating through multiple institutions, there should be digital traces in our system. Tom Brennan, the night security chief, met them at the lab entrance with a concerned expression. Sarah, there are 3 men on motorcycles circling the building. They've been trying to find service entrances for the past 10 minutes. Tom, we need you to lock down the building completely. No one gets in or out until the police arrive. Ryan checked his phone for updates from Detective Rodriguez. Federal agents are en route. The FBI is treating this as an international art fraud investigation. Sarah's fingers flew across her computer keyboard as she accessed the museum's authentication database. Years of documentation scrolled past, but she focused on entries from the past 3 years that showed patterns similar to what Derek had orchestrated with Ryan's collection. Look at this, she said, pointing to a series of entries. The Thornfield Renaissance Collection, the Morrison Impressionist Works, the Vanderbilt Jewelry Suite. All of them show multiple authentication requests during the same time period Derek was targeting your family's pieces. Ryan studied the screen over Sarah's shoulder, close enough that she could feel the warmth of his body and smell his cologne mixed with the adrenaline of their dangerous night. The authentication specialists listed here are the same ones Derek used for our insurance appraisals. Dr. Margaret Steinberg, Dr. Patricia Hernandez, Dr. William Chong. They're all part of the network. But some of these records show contradictory findings, Sarah noted, scrolling through detailed reports. Dr. Hernandez flagged the Morrison pieces as potentially problematic, but Dr. Steinberg certified them as authentic 6 months later. The sound of shattering glass echoed through the museum's corridors. There in the building, Tom's voice crackled over the radio. East Wing, near the American Art Collection. Ryan pulled Sarah away from the computer. We have what we need. Let's go. Wait, I want to download everything to a secure drive. This evidence could expose the entire network. As Sarah worked frantically to copy files, the sound of footsteps grew closer. She could hear voices speaking in what sounded like Eastern European accents, professional and calm despite their illegal entry into one of the world's most prestigious museums. 30 more seconds, Sarah whispered, watching the progress bar on her screen. Ryan positioned himself at the lab entrance, ready to defend their position if necessary. The museum's layout provided multiple escape routes, but they needed to complete the file transfer before moving. Sarah Mitchell? A man's voice called from the corridor outside. We know you're in there. We only want to talk. Like you wanted to talk to my mother? Sarah replied, surprising herself with her defiance. Your mother was well compensated for her work. She chose to make things complicated toward the end. The file transfer completed just as the first armed man appeared in the lab doorway. Ryan tackled him immediately, sending both men crashing into a display case filled with ancient Roman jewelry. Sarah grabbed the secure drive and her laptop, following Ryan's earlier instructions to head for the emergency exit near the Egyptian wing. Behind her, she could hear the sounds of a violent struggle as Ryan fought with their pursuer. This way, Tom Brennan appeared at a service corridor intersection, gesturing for Sarah to follow him toward a hidden elevator that led directly to the building's security command center. I can't leave Ryan. The FBI is in the building now. They'll find him. Sarah hesitated for a moment before following Tom into the elevator. As they descended to the security level, she could hear gunfire echoing through the museum's corridors above. The security command center looked like mission control, with dozens of monitors showing every corner of the museum. Sarah could see FBI agents moving systematically through the galleries, while Derek's associates attempted to evade capture among priceless works of art. There, Tom pointed to one monitor showing Ryan fighting with 2 men near the Temple of Dender. He's holding his own, but they've got him outnumbered. Sarah watched Ryan use the museum's architecture to his advantage, ducking behind ancient columns and using display cases as barriers. His business suit was torn and bloodied, but he moved with surprising agility. "Can you isolate that gallery and lock it down? Emergency protocols allow us to seal individual sections, but it would trap everyone inside." "Do it. The FBI can get Ryan out safely, but we need to prevent Derek's people from escaping." Tom activated the emergency lockdown for the Egyptian wing, just as additional FBI agents arrived to support their colleagues. Within minutes, the sounds of gunfire stopped, replaced by the calmer voices of law enforcement securing the scene. Sarah rushed back through the museum corridors as soon as Tom gave the all-clear. She found Ryan sitting on the steps of the Temple of Dinder, being treated by paramedics for cuts and bruises. His face lit up when he saw her approaching. "Are you hurt?" she asked, settling beside him despite the paramedics' protests about maintaining sterile space. "Nothing serious. Did you get the files?" Sarah held up the secure drive. "Everything. Authentication records, specialist communications, financial transfers. Enough to expose the entire network." An FBI agent approached them with Derek in handcuffs. Derek's earlier confidence had completely evaporated as the scope of his exposure became clear. "Ms. Mitchell, Mr. Carter, we'll need detailed statements about your investigation. But I want you to know that your work tonight has helped us identify an international art fraud network that's been operating for over a decade." Derek looked at them with bitter resignation. "You have no idea what you've destroyed. The network provided services to collectors who appreciate art more than bureaucratic regulations. The network exploited artists and manipulated grieving families," Sarah replied firmly, "including my mother, who died believing she was preserving historical artifacts." As the FBI led Derek away, Ryan turned to Sarah with an expression she hadn't seen before. The intensity of their shared danger had stripped away all pretense and formality between them. "Sarah, I need to tell you something. When I thought I might not see you again tonight, I realized that somewhere between thinking you were a thief and watching you risk everything to find the truth, I fell in love with you." Sarah felt her breath catch. The admission was completely unexpected but felt entirely right after everything they had experienced together. "Ryan, when I first saw you at the auction, I thought you were just another arrogant collector. I never imagined you were someone who would fight beside me to honor my mother's memory and protect your family's legacy." Ryan reached for her hand, his touch gentle despite the cuts on his knuckles from their fight in the museum. "I want to rebuild Carter Securities the right way, with transparency, with integrity, and with you as my partner, in business and in everything else." Sarah looked around the museum that had been her professional home for years, now the site of their victory over Derek's criminal network. The ancient artifacts surrounding them had witnessed countless human stories of love, loss, triumph, and renewal. "Yes," she said simply. 6 months later, Sarah stood in the renovated Carter Securities Gallery, watching Ryan address a gathering of collectors, museum directors, and law enforcement officials. The event marked the opening of their new authentication and recovery services, dedicated to helping families reunite with stolen or misrepresented heirlooms. The walls displayed several pieces from Ryan's family collection that had been recovered from international buyers and restored to their original condition. The Midnight Empress, miraculously traced through Derek's network and returned to its rightful place, occupied the centerpiece position. The Carter Mitchell Authentication Institute represents a new approach to protecting cultural heritage, Ryan announced to the assembled crowd. "Our mission is to ensure that future generations can appreciate authentic historical artifacts while preventing the exploitation of artists and families." Sarah smiled as she listened to Ryan speak. The man who had once viewed her as a criminal had become her husband 3 months ago in a ceremony held in this same gallery, surrounded by the recovered treasures that had brought them together. Derek and his network faced federal prosecution for art fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy charges. The investigation had recovered over $50 million worth of stolen artifacts and exposed corruption in authentication networks across 3 countries. As the evening wound down, Ryan found Sarah standing before her mother's final work, a display case containing several of Elena Mitchell's original jewelry pieces that had been donated to the Institute's permanent collection. "She would be proud of what you've accomplished," Ryan said, wrapping his arms around Sarah from behind. "She would be proud of what we've accomplished together." Ryan turned Sarah to face him, his blue eyes reflecting the warm gallery lighting. "Ready to go home, Mrs. Carter?" Sarah kissed him softly, tasting the future they would build together. "I'm already home." Outside, Manhattan sparkled with evening lights, but Sarah and Ryan had found something more valuable than any gemstone in the city's vast collection of treasures. They had found each other, and in the process, they had discovered that sometimes the most impossible things happen when two people choose to trust each other completely. The impossible had indeed happened, just as the headlines had promised months ago. A woman accused of theft had not only cleared her name, but had also found love, justice, and a new purpose with the man who had once been her accuser. Their love story would become legendary in Manhattan's art world, but for Sarah and Ryan, it was simply the beginning of their life together.